In ancient Egypt, there was a pharaoh who lived in great opulence. Whenever he wanted to get away from court and relax, he would call his first counselor to him and say, "Get my boat ready for sailing." There was nothing the pharaoh liked more than cruising up and down the river Nile, enjoying the cool breeze, and watching his people as they worked on shore. One day, he noticed a beautiful young woman standing at the river's edge, knee-deep in the marsh, casting out her fishing net. There was something alluring about the woman that caught the pharaoh's attention. She had long, jet black, wavy hair that hung down to her waist, and large, lustrous eyes that accentuated perfect features. As his boat slowly glided by, he couldn't take his eyes off her. He said to his counselor, "Go on shore and find out if that woman is married." When the counselor returned, he said, "My lord, she is married to a fisherman. Their neighbors say they are good people and are happily married." "Ah, that's too bad," sighed the pharaoh. But the clever counselor replied, "Your Eminence, you are the pharaoh, and you can have anything you want. Don't be discouraged just because that lady's already married. If your conscience allows it, there are ways to remove the husband." The pharaoh smiled. "What have you got in mind?" And the two of them put their heads together and came up with a plan. The very next morning, soldiers arrived to take the young man to the palace. When the fisherman arrived in the huge marble audience hall, he was trembling with fear. The pharaoh said, "Fisherman, I have a task for you, and if you can't complete it successfully, I'll have your head chopped off for disobeying me. Tomorrow morning I want you to appear before me in court, walking and riding at the same time." "At the same time?" asked the fisherman. "Yes, at the same time," smiled the pharaoh. The poor fisherman was in shock. He hurried home and told his beautiful wife Layla the whole puzzling story. "Why me? What does he have it in for me?" he asked. It's a paradox. I can't be riding and walking at the same time." "I'm sure I don't know," said Layla. "My dear Latif, I can't figure this one out. I'm going to go to my grandmother Nana and ask her. She's very clever. Maybe she can help us." When the grandmother heard of the pharaoh's request, she said, "Take my she-goat and tell Latif tomorrow morning as he enters the palace gates to be riding on the goat's back while his feet are walking on the ground." When the pharaoh saw the fisherman walking and riding into his palace, he was very irate. "Congratulations, fisherman," he said. "You have completed my first task, but I have another one for you. Tomorrow morning I want you to appear before me dressed naked." Poor Latif, distressed, hurried home to tell Layla. "The pharaoh must be losing his mind. Now he wants me to appear before him dressed and naked at the same time. It's impossible." Layla said, "It does sound impossible. I really hope Nana can help us out this time." When the grandmother heard the pharaoh's second request, she said, "Tell Latif not to get dressed tomorrow morning, but instead to pull one of your fishing nets over his head until it drapes down to the ground, covers him." When Latif entered the court the next morning, the Pharaoh was furious. This fisherman had outsmarted him twice and humiliated him in front of his own court. He thought to himself, "How can I rid myself of this clever man? If I want his wife to become my wife, I have to think of some utterly impossible task that is impossible to achieve." So in his rage and frustration, he said the first crazy thing that came into his mind. "Fisherman, tomorrow morning, I want you to appear before me carrying a baby. A baby who can tell tall tales. Yes, a baby who can tell tall tales." Latif was distraught. He ran home and sobbed in Layla's arms. "It is impossible. I am lost. There is no hope. Where on earth is there a baby who can even speak, let alone tell tall tales?" Layla said, "I agree. It sounds utterly impossible, but we cannot give up hope. We must not give up hope. I will again go over to grandmother's, right now," and out the door she went. When grandmother, Nana, heard the Pharaoh's third request, she said, "There is only one kind of baby on earth that can tell tall tales, and that is one who is half genie and half human. But you are in luck. I think the goddess Isis must be smiling on you both. Just last week, my friend the midwife told me that a baby who was half human and half genie was born last month in the town next over to us. Go there, tell her I sent you, and she will help you." Well, the next morning, when Latif entered the court carrying a wee baby, the Pharaoh was furious. He shouted at the fisherman, "You expect me to believe that tiny infant can tell me tall tales?" Latif remained silent, but the baby called out, "Peace be on you, O great Pharaoh." The Pharaoh gasped in surprise, and the baby began his tall tale. I'm a well-to-do fellow, you know, and I'll tell you how I got my wealth. 50 years ago, I was poor and hungry. One day, I stood beneath a date palm tree that was heavily laden with sweet, ripe fruit. But they were way high up, and I couldn't reach them. I had nothing to get at them, so all I had was dirt. So I reached down and picked up a big clod of earth and threw it up into the tree, trying to knock down those dates. But they were the ickiest, stickiest, gooeyest, glueyest dates ever. And that earth held fast on those dates. I kept throwing up clods of earth, and before I knew it, I had more than an acre of land stuck up in that tree. Well, there was nothing the Pharaoh liked more than sailing, unless it was listening to a tall tale. He was absolutely delighted with that tiny baby. He said, "That sounds very reasonable to me. You go on with your tale, you tiny teller feller." And so the baby continued. "Well, I went to my friend and borrowed his oxen and plow and a big sack of sesame seeds. I climbed that tree. I plowed the soil. I planted the seeds. Then the rains came and the crops grew, and I became a wealthy man. I took that money and I bought property, and I have prospered ever since. But there is one thing that annoys me." "And what's that?" asked the Pharaoh. "Ever since that very first harvest, there's been one tiny sesame seed stuck in the bark of that date palm tree, and it's just out of my reach. And no matter how I pry at it with a pointed stick, I can't get it out. I can't get hold of it. So I'm asking for your sage advice, O Great One. What should I do? Should I keep trying to get hold of it, or move on and let it go?" "Well," laughed the Pharaoh, "clever one, you are a wealthy man. You could buy a whole warehouse of sesame seeds if you want to. I say, move on. Forget that one. Let it go." "Ah," said the baby, "you are wise, Pharaoh. So why don't you follow your own advice?" "Uh, what? Follow my own advice? What do you mean?" asked the Pharaoh. "Well," said the baby, "you are the Pharaoh after all. You have absolute control over everything in the land. You own buildings, property, uncountable treasures, jewels, not to mention hundreds of beautiful wives showering you with affection day and night. So why keep trying to reach for one that you cannot get? Let it go." The baby's words hit the Pharaoh like an icy cold wave that rolled over him and shocked him to his core. How could this wee babe know my innermost thoughts? And then he had a very uncomfortable realization. It was very disturbing. His conscience was pricking him like a sharp thorn. It said, "This woman that I want for my wife could make my soul a prisoner. For if I take her husband's life, the man she loves, every time I look at her, I will be filled with regret, guilt, and remorse. So I must let her go." All this time, the poor terrified Latif stood at the Pharaoh's feet, anxiously waiting for him to speak, wondering if he would ever again see his beautiful wife Layla. Finally, after what seemed a very long time, a smile played across the Pharaoh's lips. He said, "So be it. Go home, good fisherman, and may the god Amun bless you and your dear wife." And that is the tale of the Pharaoh and the fisherman. But it's not quite the end of my story, for this is a morality tale, and it wouldn't be complete if I didn't tell you the moral. So, if ever we find ourselves in a very difficult situation, which seems there's no end to it and impossible to get through, please remember the poor fisherman, and perhaps, just perhaps, we will get through it after all. Thank you.